You're listening to the Real Estate Runway podcast, powered by Quattro Capital, where we are all about alternative business and investment strategies to help you amplify life and maximize wealth. Here's your host, the recovering engineer turned multifamily investor, Chad Sutton.
All right, Real Estate Runway family, it brings me great joy to do this episode today. I'm going to feature a piece of my arsenal, a piece of our giving muscle here at Quattro Capital. This is a group we have been fortunate enough to find called the National Christian Foundation, NCF for short. You'll find everything you need to know about them in the show notes, as well as where to go and find them. We're going to talk today about how to maximize your giving. We're going to talk about a group who can help you avoid having to start a private foundation and use effectively the tool that they have that's much simpler and much less overhead to you. We're going to talk about a team who can help you be most efficient with strategizing your gifts and your tax benefits, giving equity of your company or complex gifts pre-sale, pre-tax, which is going to make your gift go so much further. This team will help you deploy that gift. And if you get to the point to where you actually see opportunities to invest in a venture or an organization, not donate, but invest in a company that you think is going to change the world for the betterment of the kingdom or the betterment of society in general, these guys can help you do it, okay, in a tax compliant way. I'm really excited to introduce Chris Lane and Bryan Chrisman from the National Christian Foundation. They're a part of our team. We work with them with the Quattro Giving Fund, and I'm really excited to share what we have learned is possible in the private equity world with you all. So without further ado, let's get right into the episode. And oh, by the way, if you get any value out of the show, please scroll down, leave us that 5-star review and thoughtful comment. Those ratings really help us spread the word of the show and get to more people just like you to share the wealth of knowledge that we have here at Quattro Capital on the Real Estate Runway podcast. If you want to follow us on social media, all of our partners and the company is on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. You can find us at Team Quattro Capital, one word, no special characters, or just visit us at thequattroway.com. And if you want to be on the show, visit us at thequattroway.com/podcast. So let's get right into the episode. Here we go. All right. Real Estate Runway family, welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Runway podcast. Today's episode is Philanthropy Edition. So I have a very special team here online with us today from the National Christian Foundation. I'm so excited to introduce to you Ms. Chris Lane and Mr. Bryan Chrisman, who have recently linked arms in the recent months with Quattro Capital, launching our Quattro Giving Fund. And we're just going to talk about some of the really cool things that this group is able to do that I didn't even know was possible until my stewardship pastor randomly made an introduction and we discovered all the possibilities. So Chris, Bryan, welcome to the show. This has been a long time in the making. How are y'all doing today?
Thank you, Chad. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, great to see you again, Chad. Happy to be here. The invite.
Absolutely. So before we kind of get into some of the products that you guys offer and how we're working together and such, who is National Christian Foundation? What is your charter? What are y'all doing in the world? Let's go into that first, and then we'll go from there.
Okay.
What do you say?
Well, you happened to ask us this question in our 40th anniversary year. So NCF is not brand new. It's been around for 40 years. It's one of the largest U.S. nonprofits and the largest Christian grant-making organization in the world. So since 1982, some big numbers, how you like to give those little big numbers. Okay, so on behalf of our givers, we've mobilized more than $15 billion to over 71,000 charities through giving platforms that include giving funds, which are donor advised funds, and using expert strategies for non-cash giving. And I think our caveat really is this: highly personalized service. We're always there with questions, and we walk our donors through a variety of platforms and possibilities to provide their tax-saving charitable solutions. It really helps Christians steward their resources well and allows givers to support causes that God places in their hearts. And what makes my heart beat personally is working at NCF, which I would do for free. Don't tell anyone that, but I've watched this unleash, okay, as givers ponder different platforms and the ways that they can bring their assets forward into the kingdom of God. So it's been just a joy working at NCF for the past 7 years.
Yeah, I love that.
Great. I can't add anything to that.
Maybe the only thing I missed, Bryan, was our founders are Terry Parker, Larry Burkett, and Ron Blues. So those are some pretty familiar names out there in the world of Christian exercising your resources to mobilize them for the kingdom.
I love that. And so what I'm recalling is in our first meeting after we had just been introduced, I approached you, Chris, and I think Jessica, your partner on the call. And I was saying, look, Quattro has a goal. We want to launch a foundation and we want to start influencing not only our giving, but those of our investors, and really have a good vehicle that we need to staff up and learn how to operate and really start putting money to work from that perspective in the community and maybe even back into our properties. And so I was articulating this dream that I had, and you just were smiling the whole time because you knew what you had in the box for me already. And so that was the donor advised fund. So when we walked into this, folks listening, a lot of you out there who listen to the show, we talk about philanthropy. A lot of you have expressed thoughts of starting your own foundations or your own nonprofits or things of that sort. And that's what we thought we had to do also to move money in the way we were wanting to move it. And then we talked to NCF and we discovered that there's this all-star team already in place who has this product called the Donor Advised Fund. And we kind of went through why this is a lot easier than running a foundation, but gives us the same flexibility and had the ability to accept complex gifts. So listeners don't know what the heck I just said. So let's go into that and let's figure out what all that means, because that was just some of the muscle that I think NCF brings to the table on the vehicle side. Let's start there.
Okay. So first of all, I'm the executive director in the Miami office of NCF. So one of the biggest things NCF brings to the table is just, we have 40 offices nationwide to service people in all different parts of the United States. And we also have a very large team in Georgia. I like to call it our boutique legal team with a variety of expertises. There's no question that I've been asked about gifting that my team hasn't been able to answer. So I'm a tiny little speck on a very large team of a lot of expertise. But let's hit on what you were talking about. The popular giving vehicles is what we would call them, giving vehicles. So people may be more familiar with the name private foundation. But if I listen, like I did with you, Chad, and your team, what you really wanted was to be able to give effectively. So if you were comparing, let's say, a private foundation and a donor advised fund and some of the benefits of a donor advised fund, there's going to be some hot buttons that we can hit right away. And you're going to go, oh, okay, I see the benefit there. So for instance, let's take a donor advised fund as you look down at perhaps the difference between a private foundation and a donor advised fund. What's my deduction for cash gifts? So in a donor advised fund, up to 60% of adjusted gross income. In a private foundation, up to 30%. That's a big difference. So as you're mulling over what the needs are of your family, you may want to take a look at that. For publicly traded securities, fair market value, up to 30% of adjusted gross income that you can donate. And in a private foundation, up to 20%. And other non-cash, fair market value, up to 30%. And then in a private foundation, only 20%. But the one that I like the most, and it usually does it if you're looking at a non-liquid asset donation, something that's not cash, which is what people talk to us a lot about, real estate, private equity, mineral rights, intellectual property rights. The difference in that donation is usually what stops the conversation, because if you donate into a private foundation, the deduction is basis only. And into a donor advised fund, such as the National Christian Foundation, where we are very large and specialize in these types of gifts, it's fair market value. So that's usually what stops the conversation right there, because they want the highest deduction available to beat the capital gains and give more to charity. So Brian, did I miss something that might have explained it a little better, or did I hit some of the high points there?
No, I think you hit it perfectly. And we each kind of explain, depending on the potential client, the advantages. I really focus in on just the simplicity of a donor advised fund. Before getting involved in the National Christian Foundation back in 2012, I was one of Chris's colleagues. I opened up the 17th office for the National Christian Foundation, which was in Denver, Colorado. But before I ever even got involved with the organization, I was a giver. And I was just floored, similar to you, Chad, when I learned that what NCF will frequently call their giving fund is a charitable checking account, where I could do all of my giving into this charitable checking account. At the end of the year, my wife, Suzanne, and I, we could just log on and we could see what we had contributed, whether it was cash. CF actually helped me. I spent 26 years in the insurance industry, and they helped me make 2 complex gifts using my business, non-voting stock in my 2 companies. And I was just amazed that my CPA had not ever explained this to me. My financial advisor had never explained how I could use my business as an engine to fund our charitable giving. And it radically simplified our giving. I was in the insurance industry and I made about 50% of my income in the fourth quarter of each year. We're doing employee benefits. And so I would find myself like in November and December with every year somewhat of an influx of cash that we wanted to be charitable. We wanted to give. We weren't always prayerful and, in all honesty, or strategic in our giving. I just wanted to give it away because I needed that tax deduction that particular year. Well, when I learned that I could just put my money in a donor advised fund, private foundation, my account at NCF, I could put that money in November and December, and then I could take a breather and I could enjoy giving that money away on February 8th, August 4th. I could pray about it. I could be more strategic. I could even out my charitable giving. I didn't all have to be in December of each year. So that was very helpful to me. Then when I learned that I could actually, instead of paying myself, which was primarily commissions, I could give interest in my business, and I could get a deduction for the fair market value of my company. I had to go get a qualified appraisal to do that. NCF helped me through that process, directing me to the people that could provide that. I was astounded. One, I got a significant tax deduction of close to $350,000 the first year, which is a lot of money to me, and saved us. Actually, that was my tax savings on our charitable giving that year. And I'm like, that is astounding. That was money that I would be paying to the IRS. And instead of cash flowing to me, that I had to call income and then give, once I gave interest in my business, every time we had a distribution from our LLC, NCF as a charitable shareholder, they received 15% of our revenue. That never showed up on my income statement. NCF never paid any taxes on that money, but that money was later available in my giving account, my giving fund. And that was where we got to give and support our favorite charities. So just that whole process of being able to use business as an engine to fund charitable giving, and instead of money coming to me and then sending it to NCF, just go directly. It just radically simplified our giving. So I became a fan and then had the fortunate opportunity to help open up an office, because there was no office back in 2012 in Colorado, like Chris is doing in South Florida.
So let's unpack that for a second, because folks, this is why I brought this team on here. Okay. So you heard Chris talking about how, just if you're thinking about opening, let's go back to just foundation versus donor advised fund, right? Radically simpler, better benefits. Just comparing vehicle to vehicle. You can do more with it, right? You can actually put complex gifts in there, which I'm about to dive into. And you actually get more efficient deduction out of it for dollar that you put in. The part we haven't discussed is if you go open a private foundation, it's going to require you time, people, and money, right, to operate and be compliant and all that sort of stuff. Whereas with NCF, you're one drop in the NCF massive bucket. You get benefits of all the teams. They handled the compliance. I don't have to hire a CEO of a private foundation or the team to go do that, right? So we're getting those benefits. But coming right back to where Bryan and Chris just went, the whole complex gift idea. Let me put this in real estate terms for you, okay? Let's say we bought a property, okay? And instead of distributing money from that property to me personally, dealing with whatever tax liability I may have, and then taking a chunk of what's left over, and donating it to charity. What Bryan said he did with his business, and what you could also do with your real estate business, is let's just say 10%. Take 10% interest in your LLC, and you can actually donate interest in your company. This is a concept, folks. Interest in your company to your donor advised fund. Your donor advised fund doesn't just hold cash. It can hold complex gifts. This is a complex gift. It is a piece of your company or a piece of your asset or a piece of your thing, whatever thing it is that you own. And every time, like we ran through that so quickly, but every time that company has a distribution, Bryan's fund or Bryan's donor advised fund owned 15%. So every time the company sent money out, Bryan's fund is now a shareholder of that and gets 15% every blessed time. Talk about building a river for charity, not just a cash infusion. So let me let y'all stack on that. Did I say that right at all? Am I thinking about this right?
Perfect. And there's all kinds of tax advantages for doing it that way. Later, we had the fortunate opportunity, after I went to work for NCF, I had an offer to sell my company, both of them. And those, whenever I sold, NCF sold the shares that were in my donor advised fund. At the same time, we sold our other shares, myself and my partner. And then all of that income, all of those proceeds went into my donor advised fund, totally tax-free. I'd have to go back and look at the numbers, but it was significantly more, close to $100,000 more went into my donor advised fund than had I sold my company, paid my capital gains, then decided. So one takeaway for your audience, if you don't remember anything about this podcast, don't sell an asset without first contacting the National Christian Foundation. If you can just remember that. When I was in Chris's shoes, that's what I would say when I met with a business owner, an entrepreneur. If you don't remember anything about our lunch, just remember, do not sell your company without first contacting us. And I would even take it a step further, and that way before you even start thinking about selling, a year or 2 or 3 years before, contact Chris, contact someone on her team, and let her and the team at the National Christian Foundation, the gift planning team, which is second to none. I'm a little bolder now, Chad, because I no longer work for the National Christian Foundation. I work for the Impact Foundation, which was created by the National Christian Foundation. So I'm not like tooting my own horn, but NCF's gift planning team is second to none. You can't pay them to do an analysis because they do the analysis for free. They know that if you will visit with them, do the due diligence, do the tax planning in advance, at time of sale, you're going to come back around. And so that's one of the many advantages of working with NCF. And so as a giver today, I would encourage you and your listeners to reach out and get to know them. And even if you're not ready to make a sale, but if you own assets, definitely.
Yeah. So also one of the things I wanted to point out is that NCF is very large. So if you go into ncfgiving.com, you can look at all the locations. Chances are you've got someone to talk to you locally, and you will be able to connect immediately and walk through what that looks like. So quite often we'll get contacted. So my takeaway is this: before you sell any type of an asset, and especially if you intend to be generous on Monday after the sale of you fill in the blank, real estate, private equity, stock, that's the time to call before the merger agreement or the sales agreement is signed. I've actually developed what I call a trigger sheet. I'm part of the South Florida team, like I said, Stefan Chavidian, who's actually Billy Graham's grandson, a great founder for our area. We have what we call a little trigger sheet. So if someone says, I have intent to be generous on Monday, we've told all the ministries and the charities in the area, if your donors are telling you they have intent to be generous after the sale, say, stop for one moment. Would you be interested in speaking with someone on the NCF gift planning team about pre-tax giving? I recently had a private equity donor tell me he donated private equity, and he did the math, and he had always been generous, but then he started giving pre-sale. And he told me that was 38% more by giving before the sale, and made a huge difference in their family's life. And also the size of his donor advised fund was going through the roof because now it was filling up with pre-tax dollars rather than post-tax dollars. So that might sound like a lot, but the brass tacks of it are, if you intend to be generous and you're going to do it with your assets, which is where most people hold their wealth, right? We have the asset chart and here's your cash. It's a little sliver. Here's your wealth and the big part of the pie. If you intend to be generous here, this is NCF's sweet spot. We can walk you through that and with such great ease that it will seem almost simple to do because of the expertise of our national team.
And I think I'll second that, Chris and Bryan. Like, just having experienced this now, we were literally in like brain lock mode, trying to figure out, how to be generous with our assets and also how to be like, not just cash, not post-tax dollars. How do we be generous at the asset level? And how do we do this without launching a whole nother business that is a private foundation at the same time? They've got all this stuff figured out. And the craziest thing is, we've talked about this in the context of Bryan's business. In any business, whether it's if you're a founder of Twitter or if you have a real estate holding or something like that, all you have to do is contact NCF. They will help you give whatever percentage of that deal you want. It could be when you first bought the shares or any time before you sell it, preferably earlier. And then they own the shares. And then guess what? When you go multiply, let's say you sold Twitter for 1,000x multiple. This is an extreme example. You don't have to pay taxes on your 1,000x capital gains and then give what's left. In most cases, I saw the math, right? In most cases, you as the donor will keep more of your proceeds and give more to charity than if you had taken it all in after-tax dollars, paid tax, and then tried to give some to charity. It's pretty incredible when you can optimize the tax side of things, right?
Correct. I think it's actually hard for people to fathom. I've had a lot of legal teams and CPA teams say, is this legal? You kind of lean in, and I assure you that it is. That's the other thing that I have such confidence in the excellence of the NCF team. We were born out of a desire to serve generous people, donors. So if something is gray, the team clears it up. The way that it actually works is you talk to your NCF person, and they will create what's called a giving opportunity for you where you see it in black and white. So you describe what portion of an asset that you want to gift. And then we walk it all the way through. We collect 5 or 6 documents from you and it goes to our gift planning team. They then create a gift opportunity, which you can see in writing. And that's when the light bulbs and the excitement really starts to go off because you see what happens if you give ahead of a sale. And then people get really excited because they know that they're going to be able to give more to the kingdom. So that's been a blessing. That's my favorite part, when they get the gift opportunity and they get it in the email and they go, wow, look at this. So all along the path, you have these reassurances. And what I like is it can be unlimited questions. How lawyers bill by the hour and you have your CPAs. So at NCF, you can feel free to bring your team on or your whole legal team, your CPAs, your financial advisors. We stand behind many financial advisors. And the amount of questions are unlimited. So the satisfactory answers never cease to amaze me about how we can walk through intent to be generous.
I love that. And I think I know your other favorite part, Chris, truthfully, because what we haven't, and I'm kind of springing this one on you, but what we didn't talk about touching on, and we really should before we jump to the impact fund, is it doesn't just stop with getting the money into the donor advised fund. This is where NCF really starts to shine. And so let's talk about once you've made the gift, the money's there, you have some sort of liquidity to be generous with. How does the NCF team then assist the donors in being generous in the most effective way possible by getting the money out?
One of the wonderful things is that our system internally, because it's donor advised, and CF doesn't really advise you where to give, but we can sure shine a light on all the ministries and charities. So we have a team in Alpharetta that does nothing but check status of 501s, making sure that their status is right. So we have a big team. I think the worst thing would be if you made a gift and you found out that they have lost their 501 status. But once you're in the NCF family, you can go inside. My son, we gave him $100 for his 15th birthday. And he said he wanted to do Bible translation in Africa. So I thought, oh my gosh, I wonder if that's in there. He went into ncfgiving.com, into our fund, and he searched Bible translation Africa. There were 3. And so we were able to see how many NCF donors had given there, and that they were currently 501s, and that it was bona fide giving. And then we just shine a light. So many times in South Florida, we will know, or anywhere that anyone wants to give, they'd say, we'd like to do something in anti-sex trafficking. And when we say, hey, there's 9 people in our system from Miami alone, would you like to meet some of them? And then we'll go ahead in South Florida, make the extra phone call for you and put you on the phone and help you get it out the door as well as you made it. And that has been very important to people. While we don't advise where it goes, we're able to look in our system and give a lot of choices to people and walk them through what that looks like as they're searching to give it away.
That's just so incredible. And I think being efficient with not only getting the money into the fund, but then knowing where to put it. You may already have that figured out. You may not, but you may be able to augment your purpose and your intent of where to put it using the muscle of the team. So transitioning to the final point here is we've talked, just to kind of recap, we've talked about donor advised funds versus private foundations and the benefits there. We've talked about concept of giving complex gifts via equity or shares of something rather than cash in pre-tax dollars before the sale. And we just talked about how NCF can really help you deploy that money into vetted charities or foundations that are doing the work that gets you excited, that really matches your charter and mission, right? Now, Bryan, what I'd love to let you touch on, and maybe Chris as well, is came to you with another harebrained idea saying, hey, wouldn't it be cool if at some point we were buying buildings and we were actually like investing in them with our foundation and using those for maybe housing, residents who really desperately need housing. They're coming out of a bad situation. More of a, not an investment, but a full product that is actually housing residents for charity. Or another example, maybe we decided to deploy some of our money from our donor advised fund into an equity share of the next project so that when we do that business plan and multiply the equity, the donor advised fund still benefits. This is where we got a little more complex and this concept of an impact fund showed up. And so, Bryan, I'd love it if you would kind of take the lead and explain what that is and how that can be super powerful in actually having the foundation hold an equity position in some sort of a charitable venture that we may be running.
Absolutely, Chad. Thanks for the question. So it was about 6 years ago that many of us at the National Christian Foundation, we started getting more and more calls asking questions, exactly like the one that you asked, Chad. Hey, and this story would go similar to this. I've just ran across a gal or guy that's starting a business here in our city. And quite frankly, I think they're going to have a bigger impact for the kingdom than my church. And I want to take my donor advised fund, the assets, what we call charitable capital, money in my giving fund at NCF, and I'd like to invest in his business. Can I do that? Well, unfortunately, no. The answer back then was no, you can't, because by law, all donor advised funds can do one thing, and that is to grant to other 501c3s. So it was a couple of colleagues of Chris and mine that had the idea of, well, what if we just started a donor advised fund, but their mission wasn't to grant charitable capital, but rather invest charitable capital. So 6 years ago, everybody sat around, I don't think the IRS would grant such a donor permit 501c3 status to a donor advised fund, but they're like, well, let's just see. And literally, they just filed. Amy Minnick and Jeff Johns, our two founders, former NCF colleagues. Jeff was the senior vice president at NCF, and Amy was running the largest office up in Kansas City, the Heartland office for NCF. They just applied to see. And within, I think it was about 60 days, we were approved. This was during the Obama administration when he was really touting that businesses, not government, not charity, but businesses needed to have this double, triple, quadruple bottom line where they weren't focused solely on profits, but also doing good. And through using his words, we were almost immediately approved. Fast forward to today, 6 years later, we've had the pleasure of investing over $380 million, primarily for NCF givers, into what we refer to as redemptive or transformational enterprises. Basically, we will use your donor advised fund to invest in virtually anything, provided there's a social or a spiritual impact associated with that investment. And that is intentionally a broad definition, because our heart is if a giver wants to use their charitable capital to invest in a for-profit enterprise, we want to help facilitate that investment. In other words, we take your liquid charitable capital and we make it complex again by investing in your low income housing project. We recently, for an NCF giver, had an opportunity, since this is a real estate podcast, I'll use this as an example, was regularly investing in apartments over retail, very common, beneficial development, real estate development across our nation in various cities. And we looked at it and we're like, apartments over retail is really affordable housing. And that definitely would meet our definition of an impact investment. They're out touting 20% IRRs over the next 10 years. It's a legitimate investment. And this particular giver was able to use this donor advised fund to invest in that project, sometimes alongside their private capital. They're also investing in those projects. That's not excluded. You can do that. But it's not just real estate. It would be virtually any business, not only here in the U.S., but around the world that you wanted to invest in. The Impact Foundation was created for that very purpose. And yeah, it's very exciting. We've been able to invest, like I say, I think today we have about 300 million under management, but a total of 380 over the last 6 years in a variety of enterprises. So that's what we get the pleasure of doing over on the Impact Foundation side.
Folks, that is just an incredible amount of power to add to your giving muscle, I'll say it. And for those watching on YouTube, you do see my little one has come and joined me in my lap. So we'll let everyone wave hello to Claire, who just woke up. But anyway, this is really just wow. When we come all the way from where we've started in the donor advised fund over the foundation, being able to donate pre-tax dollars and more efficiently with cash into a donor advised fund, having a team to help you deploy that and really help you find the best and most useful place for the kingdom and for the community for your gift. And then when you start to really flex that giving muscle and you figure out, gee, I now have a team who, when I'm ready, I can extend that donor advised fund and get part of this impact fund. And then we can actually go put money to work as an equity investor in a good cause that is a company or a housing venture or something like that. You know, I really folks, I have searched long and wide, and I do believe the good Lord brought me National Christian Foundation. And that's why they are here on the podcast. I'm sharing them with you. Philanthropy is one of our 4 pillars here at Quattro, and I would be totally remiss if I did not put this out on a pedestal and scream from the mountaintops that this stuff is possible and you can do it too without hiring a massive legal team or figuring out the tax law and all that kind of stuff. They've done it for you. Okay. This is proven. Massive names use it. Google NCF and you'll probably see celebrities' names next to it. I won't name them on here, but it's mostly public record. People whose names, including mine, are doing this. So Chris, Bryan, any final thoughts on this? This has been an incredible podcast. I'm excited just listening to it again.
Oh, well, I just say use this as a resource. If you have questions, you're not committing to anything. You can just use NCF as a resource. We love to answer questions about being generous. I mean, it's our honor. So thanks for having us, Chad. This has been a great review of some of the things that NCF does.
Yes. I'm just going to say this, that on behalf of Impact Foundation, there is a growing group of investors that have come to their own conclusion that charity is not going to solve all the world problems, especially not in the area of economic development. We had a podcast earlier today for Christian media and film. So many people are so sick and tired of logging on to Netflix and Amazon Prime and not finding anything for families to watch together with, you said, Claire. We're able to invest in, partly the reason that is that there's no content is because Christians honestly have just walked away from Hollywood. We just want to talk trash on it, that they don't produce anything. They'll produce whatever we're willing to invest in. So there's just so many opportunities. And I do agree with the majority of NCF givers that there's a lot other ways to use charitable capital.
Well, this is so incredible having you two on. We've gone a little bit long, so we won't get into the Quattro questions, but what is the best way to get in touch with your office? I know people are going to have questions and there's going to be a lot of curiosity. You can't figure all this out from one podcast episode, but my hope is that I could tease your brains a little bit, tickle your giving muscles, and How do we get in touch
So
with you guys?
ncfgiving.com is where you go, and / it'll have an option. Just click locations and see who's close to you. And you will be met with a relationship manager like myself who will help walk you through your generosity plans. So I guess my big thing is a lot of people have financial advisors, but when you're looking for someone to walk through with you as your philanthropic advisor with an eye on the kingdom and moving the causes that matter to God, it's ncfgiving.com, and somebody's going to answer that can help take you on that journey of generosity.
Yes. And for Impact Foundation, those of you interested in making impact investments using your charitable capital, you can reach us at impactfoundation.org. My email is brian@impactfoundation.org. So you can easily find us by doing a Google search or call Chad.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say call Chad, but if you really wanted to speak to me personally, I'm C-Lane at ncfgiving.com. So thank you, Chad. Hi, Claire.
She's starting to wake up here. So I think the last little bit here is folks, scroll down on whatever modality you're listening to this to. Those links and phone numbers will all be available for your clicking and calling pleasure right immediately. And reach out to these folks. They will help you. Reach out to me if you have questions. I'm happy to be a reference as well. And yeah, I look forward to seeing what you and your giving muscle can do with this. And talking about it takes a village. You having a strong giving muscle is the first step. But putting the right army and village behind you with the knowledge, know-how, and vehicles to really be the most efficient with your pre-tax, even giving dollars, it's going to be amazing to see what you can do with it. And I can't wait to be a part of that with you. So Chris and Bryan, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for coming on. I look forward to seeing what good comes of this episode. And we will continue developing the Quattro Giving Fund with you and seeing what amazingness we can do with you as well. So
well, thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Chad.
All right, everyone. This has been another episode of the Real Estate Runway Podcast, Philanthropy Edition. Until next time, over and out. Wow, wow, wow. I'm so excited you guys got to be a part of that episode with me and really hear the muscle that National Christian Foundation has to offer. If starting a foundation to further your philanthropic venture in a tax-efficient way is exciting to you, call these guys. Look at the Donor Advised Fund as an alternative. If giving out of your wealth or equity in your companies is of interest pre-tax rather than out of cash is of interest to you, give these guys a call. If you want a world-class team to help you with the legal, accounting, and matters related to putting money out in the most efficient way, give these guys a call. And look, if you find a way to invest into a venture that is a company or a fund or something like that, or a venture or a project in housing or something like that is going to better the community, better the kingdom, give these guys a call. They can really help you do it. I'm excited to see where your brain takes what I just gave you. And until next time, this has been an episode of the Real Estate Runway Podcast. Over and out.
We hope this episode was insightful and brought value to your day. If so, please be awesome and leave us a 5-star review. Find out how Team Quattro can help you at thequattroway.com. Until next time, this is the Real Estate Runway Podcast.